Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or of course, you can subscribe to that channel and hit that notifications button. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about Terence Crawford and his victory over Shawn Porter. We are going to discuss the controversial stoppage. We'll get to that in a little bit. First and foremost, though, for those of you that did see the technical breakdown video, you might have been pretty impressed. We got pretty much everything as we thought it would go, right? Every aspect we looked at with the little technical elements, they were on point. Thank you to Sid as well for your message on Twitter, mentioning that, talking about that. I appreciate you guys. The first three rounds, let's talk about the technical elements first. The first three rounds I actually thought Shawn Porter won. I know the commentary team gave the second round to Terence Crawford. It was a close round, a swing round, but I thought Porter worked in a more southern manner, catching him with cleaner shots. The fourth round, Porter became a little bit more consistent in his patterns. What we spoke about in the preview video, I do implore you, if you're interested in technical elements of the sport, to check that video out. I won't go into as much detail, but one of the things we mentioned is how you had to change up the patterns against Terence Crawford. You have to make yourself unpredictable. You have to mix it up. You have to be patient. Don't go trying to bum rush him, and I didn't think Porter was going to do that. I explained. I don't think it's going to be a Bull versus a Matador type fight throughout. There are going to be moments where he's going to get on the back foot and try and lure Crawford in and then change that to suddenness. As you're moving away, suddenly jump in. And I showed you clips of how Mean Machine and Kell Brook have had this success with Crawford early in the fight. It takes away his jab. It makes him tentative. It also makes him tentative to lead with power shots. Early on, he struggles a little bit when you're taking that approach to find range, to find a home. So when you mess with the range and you mess with your patterns and then you're willing to change them up, you could potentially carry that into the latter half of the fight. But he did become too consistent, Shawn Porter, in that fourth round with his pattern. And much of that had to do with Terence Crawford switching to southpaw, gave him a little bit something extra to think about. And I thought Terence Crawford took that round. The other thing we spoke about is that when you get right up close to Terence Crawford, although he has a wrestling background, he has sons that are competing at very high level wrestling in high school. Despite that, Terence Crawford's inside game is very much about trying to nullify you, tie you up, and then push you away. It's Vladimir Klitschko-esque. It's Muhammad Ali-esque. He doesn't really bust you up on the inside the way someone like Errol Spence will. He doesn't go to work on the inside. He holds and ties up. Now that's all well and good, but when you're against a guy who's as slippery on the inside, who's as frenetic in his movement and finds space like Shawn Porter, what can end up happening, I explained, is that because Shawn Porter's so sudden, he can hit you on his entry as he's coming inside, and then he falls into you. You tie him up. Even if nothing else is thrown from that point forth, well, he landed a shot as he was coming in, so he wins the exchange. If he comes inside and he lands 1 or 2 and you don't land any, or you just land 1, you've been outlanded 2-1 or 3-1. So you're losing that exchange. And you saw that Crawford, for long periods of time throughout this fight, not long periods of time, sorry, consistently throughout this fight, and you see it in round 5, very much a case of holding him, trying to tie him up, and then pushing him away. Then he resets. He's not going to work on the inside. And so I thought Shawn Porter won the 5th round. And Andre Ward said, Porter is not as intense as usual. He's methodical. So despite that late flurry, there's a body shot, a late flurry of body shots, I think, from Terence Crawford, he didn't do enough to win the 5th round. So Ward picked up on the things that we were mentioning pre-fight, the necessity to be more methodical and to mix that up with coming in suddenly. You don't want to be a constant bull. Sometimes you just want to sit there like you're not doing anything. Sometimes you want to get on the back foot trying to lure him in. Then you become a bull. It's that constant switch that can prevent Terence Crawford from finding the range. Round 6, I felt, went to Terence Crawford. In fact, I thought it was a great round for Bud. And you saw that the step back was on point. Again, in the preview video, we spoke about the best thing that Terence Crawford does, in my humble opinion, is the method in which he shoots his body weight from front to back to create space, to generate power off the back foot. It's that distance control, punching off of the back foot, which is his best weapon, in my humble opinion. And it was on point. He was targeting the body with straight shots and uppercuts. And he looked very good in the 6th. In the 7th, Timothy Bradley said, it's the patience, the athleticism, the sharpness that's given Bud problems. Andre Ward said, Shawn Porter has fought the perfect fight. A good mix of fighting, probably less than we thought he was going to do, but good boxing, answering at the right time. His defense has been good. And the commentator said the critical word in the description right there is mixing it up. And Andre Ward said, it's boxing, it's fighting, it's a little bit of everything. When you want me to come forward, when you want me to come forward, I'll step back. It's a little bit of everything. Now, I know Andre Ward said less than we expected. Well, if you'd watched the Chris Andre preview video, it wouldn't have been less than you expected. I firmly expected Showtime Shawn Porter to come out in that manner. He did. He got his tactics spot on, in my humble opinion, and he won that round, although I do think it was a swing round. I personally had it to Porter. So I've now got it Porter 5-2 up, possibly 4-3, but I'm seeing Porter with a really good start here. In round 8, with 2 minutes and 45 seconds of the round remaining, you see how you see that step back again from Terence Crawford and that uppercut. It's a potent weapon, and like I said, I spoke about it in the preview, showed you various clips, and yeah, Bud started really well. Shawn Porter came on strong in the middle there, and then I felt Bud finished well, and I felt he won that round. So 5-3 at this point to Shawn Porter. By round 9, the commentary team are telling you that only 21% of the jabs that Terence Crawford had thrown had landed, right? Now, the point is here, this is what we were talking about in the preview again. You can take the jab away from him, right? But having said that, I did feel as though in that particular round, the irony is that in that particular round, the minute they said that at the beginning of the round, Crawford then started to out-jab him. He started to find a home for it, and Porter started to slow down now. You're seeing signs that Porter's slowing down, and yeah, there was a last-minute uppercut as well, a step-back uppercut from Bud, and he looked good in that round. He was in control. By round 10, again, you saw the step-back uppercut knockdown. So the shot that we were talking about, this is the one that could potentially win him the fight, is the one that really dropped him. So again, something that we spoke about in the preview, and then there was another attempt at that. He missed the uppercut, caught him with a hook, landed with another hook, and down went Porter. And the fight was bizarrely, I must say, stopped in favor of Terence Crawford. Based on those 2 knockdowns, I would have had Crawford up going into the final couple of rounds. Now, bear in mind, like I said, I had 5-4 prior to that round. That would have been a 10-7 round at the least for Terence Crawford. So I would have had him up, and I believe he would have won the fight. And like I said in the preview, everything I basically said would happen from a technical perspective, and how Porter would approach it, where he'd have success, where Bud would have success. It all played out. And I also explained how I felt that Crawford would come on strong late and win the fight late or on points. In the comments section, I was talking to Benjo, and you know, I wanted to make it quite clear that I wouldn't be surprised if he stopped Shawn Porter late on, right? So I wasn't surprised by that outcome. What I was surprised about, in other words, had you told me pre-fight, you know, Porter's going to stop him, Crawford's going to stop him in round 10, I wouldn't be stunned. But was it a stoppage deemed worthy of a stoppage? I have to say, I thought it was bizarre. He had his faculties intact. He's on the floor, beating the ground. He's furious with himself for the errors that he's made. Yes, he was slowing down. He was, that's true. But he was lucid. He was banging the floor after a count of 2. At no point was he dizzy. In that second knockdown, there was one flush shot, but there wasn't a shot that really snapped his head back where he looked like he was in trouble. He was up by the count of 7. He was asked, "Are you okay?" Yes, he said. He said it with real conviction. And he turns around to see his dad there. Now, this is one thing I don't... Precise is going to have a field day with this, by the way. But one of the things that I don't understand here is that he said post-fight, the reason he stopped it wasn't because of what Andre Ward had said, where it wasn't what had happened up to that point, but rather what was going to happen. That kind of would have made sense. Now, I still wouldn't have agreed with the stoppage in such a close fight when your son's such a world level fighter and he's an aggressive guy who's got heavy hands. He might catch Crawford and take him out. You know, you're not talking about a guy who's feather-fisted. He's got some aggression there. He's not a monster puncher, but he's certainly got the pop to be able to turn a fight around with a couple of big shots, right? And Andre Ward's giving him a lifeline here. Is it because of what was going to happen? And he says no. It was because Shawn Porter didn't have the right camp. He felt that he was fading, essentially, and that he wouldn't have been in a position to kick on like he should have done. That's baffling to me. Because if he didn't have a good camp, what did you expect the last few rounds to look like? In other words, had he not gone down, could you have wished for a better scenario than Shawn Porter was in? A very competitive fight going into the championship rounds? Because if your thought process was, look, he's not going to make 12 rounds, why didn't you have him going full steam ahead from the first round trying to go for a knockout? Why did you fight this the more patient approach, which is what I advocated, which gave you a lot of success early on, why did you approach that if you weren't trying to build up a lead in the hope of holding out late on in the fight? I don't understand it. It is baffling. A lot of people on Twitter have been calling fix and stuff like that. Listen, it's very difficult to make that sort of accusation, right? What I will say is that if Shawn Porter was in on something like that, he wouldn't have gotten up so easily, right? Let's say for argument's sake, he wanted to go down in the 10th. For argument's sake, right? People are going to say boxing's a dirty sport. It used to happen in the past. Why would you assume it doesn't happen anymore? If that was the case, he would have made out like it was a heavier knockdown and not gotten up, or gotten up and stumbled and the ref would have waved it off, right? Now, a lot of people are saying, okay, but his dad would have been in on it. Now, one thing I'll say is this. I can't for one moment assume a dad would sell out a son, right? I know there's, a few of you that will believe this. Fair enough. I can't, what do you want me to say to you? It was a shocking stoppage in my opinion. But I don't know. I can't get my head around that he's in on it, his son's not. If his son was in on it, then to me, it's unusual that he would get up and demand to carry on. It just seems strange to me, especially if he's then not going to kick up a fuss. If he was kicking up a fuss and he was furious and he was angry, you could say, oh, that's a little bit of a bluff. The way it all happened was just baffling to me. It's possible that Kenny Porter thought, I know my son better than all of you guys. I know that he's fading. He's going to get hurt. In which case, you have to ask the question about a father training a son. Does that personal love for the boy affect the judgment of his son? Maybe you agree with Kenny. Maybe you're thinking, you know what? This was only going one way. But guys, this was a massive fight. Shawn Porter's been hurt more than this a million times in his life. The Adrian Broner knockdown was heavier than this, right? He's been down heavier than this and hit with bigger shots and stunned a lot more than he was in that 10th round. It's highly unusual. Now, one of the things that is an alternative here is that, let's say for argument's sake it's true and his son just didn't have a good camp. You could then argue that he felt, look, he lied when he said about Andre Ward not being right. It was genuinely about what was going to happen. I want to save my son from that. If that was true, in fairness to Kenny Porter, how could you not get up for a Crawford fight? The only way you could not get up for a Crawford fight is if you've lost the hunger for the sport. And if you've lost the hunger for the sport, what would happen? You would retire post-fight. And what happened? He retired post-fight. So I can't assume that Kenny Porter's out here lying. He might have just thought to himself, my son is not fit enough. I was hoping he'd built up a bigger lead. I hope he had a big lead. If he hadn't gone down in that 10th and he was just eating a few big shots, I wouldn't have stopped it. But then, based on the fact that he would have been behind on the scorecards, I don't believe he had enough in him to be able to turn it around. I know that this is going to be his last fight, perhaps. So I don't want him to take something away from the sport, or rather, I don't want the sport to take something away from him before he sails off into the sunset. That's very possible. Okay, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about this was a fix. I merely brought it up because I know a lot of people are going to talk about that and suggest it and so on and so forth. One thing I will say, I thought it was a poor stoppage. Regardless of the reasoning behind it, the man was fluid. He was not seriously hurt. And he was in the fight. Even in my humble opinion, even if that had finished a 10-7 round, he still would have been in the fight, in my opinion. He would have been 2 rounds down with 2 rounds to go. And you never know what can happen in a fight. He might have caught Crawford. He was catching him with a lot of shots. Crawford was trying that counter right hook, and although he was finding a home for it much more later on in the fight, and we spoke about how that mental pressure can add up, the mental pressure he applies with the probing early on, despite that, the suddenness of Porter was still catching him. So let me know what you think, how the fight went. Yeah, I'm proud to say I think we got the analysis pretty spot on. Let me know what you think and what you thought of the stoppage. It was bizarre to me, man. But listen, I wish Showtime the best. He's been a guy that I've loved to watch over the years. He has had a terrific career, and a lot of the fights that he's lost, the only guy that really beat him well, in my opinion, was Kell Brook. Everybody else he's fought, he's been right there with. This was a very close fight. The Errol Spence fight was another one where the knockdown decided it, in my opinion. The Keith Thurman fight could have gone either way. This is a guy who's always been there or thereabouts. Regardless of how you think the Ugas fight went, that was competitive. He's always been there with the very best names in the sport whenever he's competed. He's so underrated at doing so many things. People just think he's a brawler. He's not. And he's just comes across like a really nice guy, doesn't he? A genuine person. And it's a great loss to the sport. So I tilt my hat to Showtime Shawn Porter. I wish you the very best in life. And what happens with Terence Crawford from here going forward? How do you think he goes against Errol Spence? If that fight was to happen next, Errol Spence just got up and left. He looked disgusted. He was shaking his head, and he basically said that Kenny Porter shouldn't get paid if he was his son. So that made me laugh, because I just remember thinking, oh my word, imagine Deontay Wilder. Imagine Kenny Porter was Deontay Wilder's dad. Oh my, you're talking about one of those medieval level of family feuds, where one's trying to slay the other to get their crown. It would have been a war in the household had that been Deontay Wilder. But yeah, it was controversial, and it makes me wonder, why didn't Errol Spence hang around? Why didn't Errol Spence get in the ring and start saying, I would never quit like that, start putting it on Shawn Porter, maybe he just likes him, respects him, he didn't want to do that. But get in the ring, start calling out Bud. I don't know, I found it unusual, the fact that he shook his head. I understand, he was disgusted with the stoppage, but why did he leave? Let me know what you think, everyone. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless.